Welcome. Baruchim habaim. I am Rabbi Chasya Oriel Steinbauer, founder and director of the Institute for Holiness, Kehilat Mussar, Machon lekedusha Kehilat Mussar, based here in the Galil in Israel, and of course online to offer to the whole world. We normally meet on Sundays at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our weekly teaching and practice together, known as Awakening, Lehit Urut, Awakening Torah, Mussar Mindfulness, where we engage in the practice of Mussar, a tikkun middot, working on our soul traits to become the finest version of ourselves, working towards holiness in service of others and God. And also our practice, combining that with the knowledge and wisdom of the Dharma and Buddhism and mindfulness practice, where we combine these two as the only center in the world to do so. And we're delighted that you've joined us, where we can apply these teachings to our lives and practice. As I say, if the text is not alive for you, then you're not doing the practice. So we really want to take this time together to do this. So we didn't meet this past Sunday due to illness. Baruch Hashem, thank God, I'm on the mend. Always remember that one of your teachers lives with something chronic, and from time to time, I may not be well enough to meet. But I did go ahead and offer an audio recording of this week's teaching on the Hebrew Bible, the Torah portion called Vayera. We were together during Bereshit, and then Noach, and then Lech Lecha, and now in what we're doing now, which is moving into Vayera. So I'm delighted that you have chosen to spend this time together so that we can engage in practice and learning and growth together. So thank you. Honor yourself, honor God, honor your community, honor your practice that you've taken time to do this. We're going to move right into our kavanah. So I'm going to share a screen with you. It is our intention. We always do this before we move into practice together. It's very important to have an intention, focus for your practice to try to bring that to fruition. So we have before us doing acts of caring for the self. What does that mean? A radical act of self-care, which is what we're doing right now together, where we learn and sit and practice so that we can really come to live in alignment with our values. So, you know, from the Dharma Buddhist perspective, it's so that we can end the suffering that we cause ourselves and others. And from, of course, our Jewish perspective, it is to be on this journey to kedusha, to holiness, to taking what Rabbi Shimon Shkop says, which is really internalizing this deep desire as our first wish in the morning in service of God and others, that we want to bring God's good to others, that we want to be of benefit to them. So we say right here with our kavanah, our intention, this is something I am doing to strengthen my own soul in order to be of benefit to others in the future. May it be the case. So I'm going to stop sharing screen right now and then move back to our larger text. Thank you for your patience with all this technology and moving around. So, as we do with this practice every week, is that I've asked that we always meet to discuss the Torah portion after that Shabbat, which is usually not in alignment with Jewish tradition. Jewish tradition likes you to study the text the week before, and then so that you're ready to hear it and receive it on Shabbat. If you are blessed to be in a minyan, in a community, in a synagogue where they read Torah, or in a community, so that you can hear it and receive it, and you'll be ready because you studied it. I find that many people actually study the text on the Sabbath itself, on Shabbat. And so I want to encourage you to spend that day and that afternoon really looking at this text, so that when we meet the next day on Sunday, you're ready to know what I'm discussing and bringing up, that you've seen it in the text, and that we can move into to doing this together. So give me 1 minute while I pull this up. Okay. We are going to go through a brief, not so brief, but 15, 20 minutes of learning together on the text. And then we'll move into a guided seated meditation with some silent meditation before closing. So if you've had the opportunity to look at Vayera, you're going to see there are actually many stories here, and many that we could focus on. But we don't have time, obviously, to focus on all of them, and we want to see what we want to learn and take from this week. And in particular, if you look back at Lech Lecha, we encountered our ancestor Avraham, who in this parsha becomes Avraham after the Brit Milah, after the circumcision. And in Lech Lecha, we encountered a beloved ancestor who we struggled with, who maybe we wanted different behavior from, who wasn't balanced in the middot of acharayut, of responsibility at all times. Sometimes he was, particularly we notice a pattern where he took up the right amount of space. He had the balanced humility of anava, of really stepping up in his responsibility to care for the other, who was more of an acquaintance or a stranger, but he lacked that same responsibility and humility of taking up that proper amount of space as the patriarch, as the leader, with his own family. And we're going to see that theme follow us into Vayera. So I want to remind us what these definitions mean in Mussar practice. And before I get into these definitions, I first want to honor both our ancestors, but also ourselves in reading this week's parsha, that it may have been painful. It may have been painful to read this parsha. I'm not going to assume that it is for all of us, because we all have different experiences. But this parsha, when you really go into it and read it as the text, as your ancestors sharing with you, and perhaps what God, the Almighty, wants us to learn from this text, this encounter with the text can be unpleasant and painful. So let's honor that right now, that if you, like me, have that experience, to recognize it, to allow it, we'll investigate this together and we'll nurture some form of non-identification, some form of non-attachment and awareness, So we bow to that, we honor. Okay. Okay, so like the previous parshiyot with its challenging stories, we have to face if we have our own clinging in the text. Any wishing that the behavior was different, whether it be our ancestors or God's, all that comes with us from the previous portions. So we honor that we carry that history, that story with us. And to be aware of that, not try to be in denial, not try to push it away. We're going to follow the theme of responsibility, of humility, so we start last week in Lech Lecha, where Avraham is described as Ish Sadiq V'Tamim, righteous and blameless, pure. The same language applied to Noach earlier. As you recall, Noach loses that description, that adjective of Tamim. He's only tied to he's only later referred to as Sadiq, as you may recall, as Sadiq, as a righteous. That he loses that title, that adjective, that description by God later as Tamim, and we assume that is the case because he did not argue, he did not protest the end of the world coming, the destruction of the world, the end of all flesh and that which breathes. So he moves from Ish Sadiq Tamim is both to just Sadiq. And here we had Avraham described in the same way. And we're going to struggle with this because he's someone obviously that comes in Vayera in a beautiful way that we may see as responsibility, as being balanced and being responsible, that he protests that God is about to destroy Sodom and Amora, known as Gomorrah in English, that he, again, for people he doesn't know, he steps up and he protests. He does what God wanted Noach to do, what we assume, what we wanted Noach to do. So we see this righteous behavior, this balance, this taking up the proper amount of space, being balanced with humility. So here we see a good example of it with Avraham. So just to reiterate that in the Mussar tradition, humility is taking up your proper amount of space in relation to others, which of course is relational and situational, no more than no less. And responsibility is anticipating the consequences of your actions while bearing the burden of the other. It's holding both. So we see that clearly in this beautiful story where Avraham does argue on behalf of that. We won't see it later when it comes to his relations with his family. This is where we see the imbalance. You know, God commands him later to sacrifice, to offer his son as a sacrifice, Yitzhak. We will not see any protesting or arguing here. And we will cry out, we will want that. Very much so. So we see an imbalance. We see where he's not taking up the proper amount of space. Perhaps he's caught up too much in imbalance of the middot of Vayera, of fear and awe of God. Also in zerizut, in alacrity and enthusiasm. Perhaps he is caught up in too much in enthusiasm for fulfilling a mitzvah, to serving God, while at the expense of his son and that relationship. And we see this, it's an imbalance, okay? And so we also as his ancestors feel this yearning that Avraham, you should have protested about your son. You protested over the death of these people who are considered sinners. We can talk about what that means. But in Sodom and Gomorrah, but you're not protesting your son. Then we also see this in family relationship with Hagar and Ishmael. Here, Sarah, Abraham's wife, tells him to banish them, to kick them out, particularly the son, which of course Avraham interprets, I must kick out Hagar with the son. And Avraham is pained by this. We're even told in the Torah, specifically the text, that it's not right. It's not right in his eyes, and he feels it in his soul. It's not, doesn't want to do this. This is not right. And he so much so that he gets to be told by God, listen to your wife, listen to her voice. Where is the protest here? Where is the same man who stood and protested for Sodom and Gomorrah? Again, we feel this clinging, this desire that Avraham, why not? Why not say to your wife, I feel this is wrong. I don't want to do this. Can we talk about another solution? And then even with God, what do you mean listen to my wife? This is wrong, but again, we see this submission, this relationship with God that dominates almost his human relationships. But it's odd because on one hand, Bach and Lech Lecha, you have him, at the opening of Vayera, I take that back. The opening of Vayera, we have him, we assume from Midrash that he's just been circumcised. It's right at this moment. He's sitting in the heat of the day of the tent. 3 strangers, assuming men or malachim, angels, are coming in the desert in the heat of the day. Who travels in the middle of the desert at the heat of the day? That's another discussion. He sees them and he gets up in the middle of a visit from God. God's standing before him. God is communicating with him, verbal or not, and he gets up and leaves the presence of God to go serve others. So here we do have him deciding there's a greater need, something's more important, so much so that we learn in our tradition, in the Jewish tradition, that to welcome, to the Haknasat Orachim, to welcome in others as guests, to bring them in and to take care of them, to feed them, to do what's necessary, and maybe wash their hands, their feet, how it is in the tradition, that this is actually more important than being before the presence of God. Okay, so hold that. But then we have Avraham later on being told by God to listen to Sarah's voice. Perhaps there was another way he could have behaved. Perhaps we see this as not really balanced in humility, not balanced in yira, in awe and fear of God, not balanced in zerizut and alacrity, enthusiasm, and in particular, our middot that we've been focusing on of responsibility, not balanced, not anticipating the consequence of what this will do to Ishmael and his relationship, which he won't ever speak to him again. There's silence. Whenever there's silence in the text, it's teaching us something. There's been a breach of trust, a breach in the relationship. It's almost like the covenant, the breach, it's been broken. So Ishmael, what suffering and harm this might cause to Hagar and our ancestors on that side, that consequence. And then Yitzhak, when it comes to Yitzhak, there's complete silence there too. So there's silence in several places. He doesn't speak to Yitzhak ever again after the incident of the Akedat Yitzhak, of the binding of Yitzhak, the almost sacrifice of his son, his second son, what is called his favorite son, the son he loves, the son that which the covenant of the Jewish people will continue through. There's no communication, there's silence. That's usually a signal. Whenever there's silence afterwards, it's usually the text telling us something. Like we have Noach being completely silent after he receives that information that the whole world's about to be destroyed. And the text doesn't look so favorably on it because he suddenly moves from Ish Sadiq Tamim to Ish Sadiq. He loses the blameless, purity side, the innocence. All innocence is gone after your father attempts to sacrifice you. We live with that, we carry that. Then there's also complete silence with his wife, who actually dies during this episode. All we encounter is that when he returns, she has passed away. We have in our tradition stories passed down to us, midrashim, that she hears what he's about to do. She learns, because he sneaks out. I don't like to call it that, but he arises early in the morning as he's been commanded with zerizut, which a lot of people interpret, it's so great, he's so full enthusiasm to fulfill the mitzvah. It's like, no, well, actually, let's look at this a little bit more deeply. Let's look if this is balance, that he's taking another human being without consent and about to murder them because he's been commanded by his Almighty. Okay? So it's a little bit more complicated than our tradition. Some people in our tradition, some voices, some commentators want us to encounter or take with it. So he returns, his wife has died because she's so shocked by the news that he has taken her only son, that she birthed at 90 years old as a miracle from God, to offer him as sacrifice. Okay, so we have a tradition that she has passed away. There's silence between them. They're not able to communicate. And then there's also silence between God and Avraham. No more does God speak to Avraham in the Torah and the text after this incident. So we inherit this silence. We bring this silence into our practice. We ask ourselves, I've inherited this silence. I've inherited this tradition. I want to learn from these texts. How can I apply this to our own life? So we're going to sit with that silence and see what is there for us. So if you are sitting in a chair, please come to an upright position. If you need to stand, please do so with a chair next to you to hold you in place so that you don't lose your balance. If you have any chronic pain or any issues, perhaps even fatigue or weakness, and you want to lie down, please do so with your eyes open so you remain awake and alert. If you're sitting on a zafu or sitting cushion position, allow the full weight of your sit bones, perhaps your thighs and knees, to really be held by the earth. And we will move into as upright as possible position, not West Point stiff, as my teacher John Kabat-Zinn likes to say. Don't go like a military officer, but awake and alert, dignified, created in the image of God. And allow yourself to close your eyes if you feel safe, if you're seated. If not, just allow there to be a gaze, a soft gaze in front of you. We do this because it eliminates one of the senses so that we can concentrate on being present here in the present moment. So we eliminate the visual field. Take 3 deep cleansing breaths. Now allow your in-breath to match the length of the out-breath. This breath is a gift. When you are ready, stop trying to control it. Allow it to settle into its own natural rhythm. We begin with a short, simple body scan. Starting at the top of the head, what do you notice about yourself right now in this moment? Is there any physical tension in the body, perhaps in the neck, in the cheeks, in the tongue? Send your loving breath to any location where you feel tension to allow it to release. Down your shoulders, down your arms. Maybe you're feeling a release in your hands. Down your chest and your back, to your lower back, your stomach. Allowing a smile to come as you honor yourself and honor your practice, to know that you are unfolding, that you are settling. Such a gift to be able to be here together in a Vad, in a Sangha, in a Kehilat, a community. Being here with God, being here with Mussar, with the Dharma and your teacher. It is a great gift. As we continue to scan down into the genital area, into your buttocks and your hips, releasing any attention along the way, through the thighs, the calves, even the feet and the toes. It is well known in mindfulness practice that we cannot come to awareness, to mindfulness, until there is calmness. And of course, we don't want to force it. If it's not there for you right now, simply honor it. Simply accept with loving kindness. From time to time, I will move to silence, which will allow you time to sit with whatever is arising in you. You can trust that my voice will return, that I am aware of time. So if you are noticing that you are planning in the future or thinking about something in the past, your practice is, once you wake up to this, simply bring it back, your attention to your breath as your anchor, to my voice, to be here in the present moment. It is only here in the present moment that we can truly encounter what it is in this text that arises in us. What is the embodied felt sense? As you studied and learned this text together, as you looked at the unbalanced and balanced middot, soul traits of your ancestor Avraham, what arises in you right now in this moment? Simply recognize whatever is coming up for you. Nothing is wrong. Nothing should change. There's no need to think that you should be feeling or thinking a certain way. For some of you, there will be judgments. There may be a clinging to wishing that the behavior be different, that the tradition hand you another teaching. For others of you, there might be great compassion, a sense of even mercy, accepting and walking into the shoes of Avraham, understanding the difficulty in that place and time, what was before him, and honoring that perhaps he did the best he could do with the tool set that he had. Allow the full range that might arise in you. And begin to unfold, what is my avodah? What is my service to God and others, my practice? Where am I in the midah and the soul trait of responsibility? Where do I have room for growth? And trying to foresee the consequences of my behavior and bearing the burden of the other and considering them before I act. We will move into 10 minutes of silence as you explore and investigate the felt sense. Where is your practice? Where is your room to balance your own midah? For those of you new to meditation, you can trust that I will be aware of the time. I will ring the bells when we are to come out of our practice together. If you notice when you do wake up to your mind traveling off to some other distant land, to some other thought, feeling, or felt sense of the experience in the body, you simply, the practice is to bring yourself back to your anchor, to your breath in the present moment. That is the practice, no more, no less. So mundane, it seems like it should be simple, but not easy. My teacher, Joseph Goldstein, says the three most important words in mindfulness practice are simply begin again. And that is what we will do over and over again as we notice that we have traveled off. We bring ourselves back to the present moment with our practice to look at and recognize and allow where we are in this midah of responsibility. We move into silence. If you've noticed your thoughts have wandered, gently and kindly come to being aware. And gently bring your focus back to your breath as your anchor, to my voice in the present moment. It is normal to go off and dream or plan, so just simply come back. As you investigate where this week Vayera might sit with you, notice, allow, and begin to nurture. Begin to notice if you can, with a beginner's mind, with loving curiosity, can you learn from your ancestor Avraham and the whole experience of the text? Can you welcome it? Can you have that space between the match and the fuse to accept it with non-judgmental awareness, non-attachment, non-identification, to a place of nurturing whatever your experience is with this text? We continue now with 4 more minutes of silent meditation. In this last minute of our meditation, notice what opening, if any, has arisen for you. What have you learned in your investigation? What gift has been bestowed to you during your practice? Gently and slowly open your eyes when you are ready to join us back in this sacred space, this sacred circle on Zoom, on Facebook, on YouTube, wherever, on my website, on our website of kehilatmussar.com, on Insight Timer, on the blog, wherever you are encountering and meeting us, the podcast too, which of course can be found on Anchor and other podcasts. Do spend time each week with us in your practice. I want to thank you for your practice. Allow yourself to have an inner bow and an outer bow to your teachers, to your ancestors, to God, to community, the Sangha, the Vad, the Kehilat, to the Dharma, to Torah, to Mussar Mindfulness, your practice. Thank you. Thank you for your practice today. For those of you who don't want to encounter video, we have audio. This all gets written up a little bit differently in a blog on our website at kehilatmussar.com. We ask for your dana, your truma, your donations to allow us and enable us to produce this offering every week called Awakening Torah Mussar Mindfulness. You can donate any amount on Insight Timer, for instance. They started low as $1.99. You're welcome to find the audio there and make a donation, or you can be in touch with us through kehilatmussar.com or kehilatmussar@gmail.com. We accept donations in cash and PayPal and Zelle, in Bit, in Paybox, whatever method works for you. And we appreciate and thank your donations, as I said, because it enable us to offer this free will offering every week. We also accept sponsorships where you offer anywhere between $18 and $50 to remember someone who has passed away. May their memory be for a blessing, and we'll basically dedicate our practice to their memory and to be able to bring their blessing to others, their memory as a blessing to others. So you can also do it in honor of somebody, offer a sponsorship in honor of somebody, whether it be a teacher or the teaching or anything, in order to allow us to offer this as much to the world as possible. Finally, I will close in saying it's very good in practice. Excuse me while I look for the plug, because as you see on the screen, the computer wants to die. Technology. That we had the original kavanah, intention, that we were doing this for self-care so that we could be of service to others and God. And with that, I want to encourage practice now outside of us sitting together. So what does that look like? It looks like that you will start. Oh my gosh. Okay, hold on. It looks like the recording stopped. Give me 1 second. Okay, we're recording here. I would like to encourage you to begin with a morning affirmation with the intention, the kavanah for the day. But in particular, to begin to do a cheshbon hanefesh journal, a counting of the soul journal, looking at your words, thoughts, and deeds as they relate to how you treat yourself, others, and God. And in particular, since we're on the theme of responsibility, let's continue in that theme of how we are related to others that we don't know, who may be acquaintances or not, to those that we do know and are living under our roof or are closest to us. How we treat those two different groups differently, how our middot, our soul traits, may be more balanced or less balanced depending on our relationship with those. So just like Avraham Avinu, our ancestor Avraham, how he was with strangers, of arguing on their behalf, for instance with Sodom, that they be allowed to live. where he doesn't argue in the same way for Yishmael or Hagar, or also with his own son Yitzhak. So it's for that we want to pay attention to how we are in relation to the stranger versus the family member. Okay, so I encourage that. It's 5 minutes a day. Traditionally, it's done at night before bed, but it doesn't need to be any time during the day that fit in, no more, no less than 5 minutes. Just looking at yourself with, again, a gentle witness, one that is full of compassion and loving kindness. We're not here to beat ourselves up. If we notice something, we can notice our strengths and where we're balanced, and also where we have room for growth. And with that, I'm delighted to meet with you again, B'ezrat Hashem, on Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we can practice together on our next week's parasha, which is, of course, starting with the death of Sarah, Chaye Sarah. So again, I thank you. And if you have any questions, any thoughts, any need for dialogue about this, please reach out to us. You can make comments on YouTube. You can send email to kehilatmussar@gmail.com. Let us know how this practice is affecting you, what your needs might be, any questions. We can allow for question and answer as the sessions begin to unfold. We'll leave time for that. And I'm so grateful for you in your practice, because we know the effect it's having on your life and those around you. And so with that, thank you again. God bless. Take care.